Hi there, welcome to today's session of Every Mark Matters with Mr. McDonald. Today we are going to have a look at Edexcel History Paper 2, the American West, and our chosen question of the day is explain one consequence of the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty, 4 marks. What a lovely question to begin with. As you know, these questions are made up of three components. What I would like to just do is I'd just like to begin with breaking up this question and explaining how the exam board wants you to answer this, and then more importantly explain how to get full marks for this type of question. So firstly, our command phrase is explain one consequence. So that is nice and simple. Command phrase. And basically it is simply saying, how did X lead to Y? That's all this question is. Alright, so how did X lead to Y? Again, our focus of the question is, these questions are so short you probably worked it out, is the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. Now you've got to be careful, there are two. So you've got to make sure that you are not thinking about the 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty. Do not think about that one. So why don't we now take a real quick pause and annotate what we know about the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. And if you need to brush up on your knowledge and have a look at a textbook or an online resource, feel free to do so. But press pause on the video now to annotate this question, or the focus of this question, with the relevant knowledge that you have about the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. Okay, I'll see you shortly. Okay, welcome back. So let's just think about this question, or the Fort Laramie Treaty. So as a massive reminder, the whole point of this treaty, it's the second one. The whole idea is they're trying to improve relations between the U.S. government and the indigenous peoples, and it comes as a result of Red Cloud's War. And as a matter of fact, it's to end the Indian Wars. And this is really important here, because what the US government are about to go into is they're about to go into President Grant's peace policy, where they're trying to be a bit more peaceful. And again, what we have here is the reason why they go to war. It's to, in essence, because white settlers are going through the Black Hills because of the Bozeman Trail. So one of the consequences of this is it prevents, this one key aspect of this treaty is it prevents whites, I missed that one, yes, whites from entering the Black Hills. And with that in mind, is, as you can imagine, with all of these treaties, is it creates reservations. And the huge one here is that it creates the Great Sioux Reservation. Oh, I misspelled Sioux. Great Sioux Reservation. And then finally, because it creates a Great Sioux Reservation, as we know from previous conflicts about reservations, is that over time it's going to increase the reliance on the US government. So what it does is it increases reliance on the US government. I'm going to struggle to fit this in here. US Gov. Okay, right. So that's the relevant knowledge that we need to add in here. Let's begin to think about the final component, and that is our second order concept. And that is consequence. Now again, we teach you 5 consequences for this particular topic. So let me just burn through them. I'm just going to write them all out, and then we'll tick them off from there. So firstly, we've got conflict. Then we have cattle industry. Then we have crime. Then we have increased settlement. And then finally we have indigenous people's way of life. So just to begin with, and you probably sat there already thinking, well, I already know what they are, but I just want to explain my thinking, and you can reuse this when it comes to the real exam. So let's just tick them off as we go. Well, does it lead to conflict? Yes. Is it referring to the cattle industry? No, not really, so we can cross that off. Is it referring to crime? Absolutely not. Is increased settlement a consequence of this? And not really, no. Is it indigenous people's way of life? Absolutely, yeah. All right. So before we start, very shortly, let's just think about what the exam paper is actually after from us. Firstly, it's a 4-mark question. So what you need to do is you need to spend 5 minutes, and you need to just simply write down 1 paragraph. The exam paper simply wants you to do 4 things, and allow me to just write down my success criteria here. And with this particular question, there is no explicit links to AO1 or AO2. This particular question is basically a tick box exercise. So firstly, the first thing you need to do is you need to state/match the correct consequence. All right. Then what you need to do is you need to have 2 precise facts. You can probably get full marks without precise facts and just have 2 facts, but it's good to have them in for other questions. You need to make sure you've got your how, and you need to make sure you've got your why. And the main thing here is I tend to make sure I have my why once I've stated the consequence. All right. So what that means is that instead of doing point evidence explain, this question your answer might look really weird here, but what you're going to do in here instead is your point is that's when you're stating the consequence. Your evidence. Sorry. It's not even evidence. It's explanation is what I'm trying to show you. So you do points, then you say why. And again, because you need to do this because what will happen is the exam board will be really prickly. Because this question is really easy to actually answer, they'll get prickly about making sure that the candidates have explained why that consequence matches the event. So this is the best way. This is why I think this is the best way to do it. Then, so you state the consequence, then you've explained why that consequence matches the event. Then what you're going to do is then you're going to go onto your evidence, and that's when you bring in your 2 precise facts. And then finally you go back to explanation again. You go back to explanation again, and that's when you say how. It sounds really weird and really awkward but it's the best way to get 4 out of 4. And when you're explaining how, it doesn't need to be like multiple layers of explanation. You could just simply use phrases like this led to. All right, it's really, really easy. Or as a result. You don't necessarily need loads of reams of explanation here. Basically this paragraph or this sentence is maybe 4 or 5 sentences here. Okay? Right, so it's a 5-minute question. Set a time on your phone. If you need to brush up on any knowledge before you start, please feel free to do so. You've got 5 minutes, have a go, and I'll see you shortly. Okay, welcome back. So I'm hoping that you've spent 5 minutes having a little go at this. And I'm hoping that you have spent that 5 minutes explaining one consequence of the 18 68 Fort Laramie Treaty, definitely not the 1851 one. And as you can see here, I've actually already marked my answer in advance after a slight technical malfunction. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through it, and I'm going to demonstrate to you our success criteria that we had a look for a moment ago, where we're hoping to state or match the correct consequence, two precise facts, how and why. And again, it's that really funny structure of you putting your why after you've stated your consequence. Let's have a quick look here then. So again, I'm really conscious of my handwriting, so I'm going to read out my answer as I do it. Let's have a little look. One consequence of the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty was the destruction of the indigenous people's nomadic way of life. So firstly, there's my AO1 plus, but I've matched the correct consequence, so I've put a little mark next to that. So there is my first mark there. And this is really important here, because if you struggle with a question, so long as you just get the right consequence and then refer to knowledge that's relevant to the question, we've already definitely got 1 mark in the bag. But we're going for 4 out of 4. Let's continue. This was because it created huge resentment between the tribes and gradually reduced their independence. So again, what I'm doing here is there is my why. All right. Why did it lead to the destruction of the Plains Indians' way of life? Well, it created huge resentment, but most importantly, gradually it reduces their independence. All right. So there's my why. There's my second mark. All right. And again, I just really want to make this clear to you. There's my point where I've matched up the consequence, and there I've said why it matches. Now what I need to do is I need to bring in my own evidence. For example, the treaty created the Great Sioux Reservation, AO1. This was a large reservation that the Sioux were forced onto, and is a prime example of the US gradually sinking the land owned by the indigenous peoples, reducing their hunting grounds. AO1 again, and there's my third mark. Alright, so I've brought in 1 fact that's relevant, there's my second fact that's relevant. Have I got in precise facts? I think so, because I've actually named the Great Sioux Reservation and I've described it. Now let's have a look at my explanation. So how did this lead to the destruction of the Plains Indians' way of life? This enabled the government to have more control over the Indians, as they no longer could be nomadic, which destroyed their way of life. This led to the indigenous peoples becoming more independent on the government for resources. So here, this sentence here, this enabled the government. I am explaining how this event or how this treaty led to the destruction of the Plains Indians' way of life. And again, I've snuck in a cheeky why here. It's not essential, but I have snuck it in. I would say that's more out of habit than out of purpose. This led to the indigenous peoples becoming more independent for the government. And again, there's my why, and it matches up with my why here. So again, there's my 4th mark, which means that for my answer where I've stated a consequence, I've explained why it matches up with the event. I brought in 2 precise facts, and again, it's not anything particularly special. I've just simply described what the Great Sioux Reservation was, and then I said how, even if I haven't put that final sentence in, I would have got 4 out of 4. But because even though I've got 4 out of 4 there. So again, if I just go back to my success criteria, I've stated it. I've got 2 precise facts. I've got my how, I've got my why, making it, as I've already written here from a slight technical malfunction, 4 out of 4. So if you want to spend the time now looking over that success criteria to work out your score, obviously if you're missing your how or your why, or you've only got 1 fact, that will make it 3 out of 4. Alright then, thank you very much. I'll see you next time.